Conklin and Company with 13 ABC Action News anchor Lee Conklin. First with what's happening behind the headlines. And Take 3, our panel of political analysts.
Morning, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Conklin and Company. Today on the program, a little road repair rancor. City Council and Toledo's mayor going back and forth on road repair funding for the city. Also a blight authority. Will that help speed up the process in cleaning up Toledo? We'll talk about those topics and more in Take 3 today with Ignacio Messina, The Blade, and London Mitchell from Cumulus Radio. The November election, you'll meet a Democrat who wants to be the next state rep in Ohio's 88th district. We'll meet Bill Young a little bit later. But first, domestic violence certainly taking front and center this past week in the wake of the Ray Rice scandal, the tape that emerged that brought to light the domestic violence problem we have in this country. And we had the problem before that tape emerged. We have it still. And that's why we brought in Deidre Lashley from the Bethany House and Denise Boyer of the Lucas County Domestic Violence Task Force. Thanks to both of you for being here today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
I mentioned the tape, and the networks decided late in the week not to show that tape anymore. And to me, if you haven't seen it yet, you don't know what the story is about, then maybe there might be a problem there, or if you haven't heard about this story. But I think the crux of this is that domestic violence has happened long before this Ray Rice situation, and it continues to happen. And it's been long overdue since we had somebody on to talk about the problem that pervades in our society. So Deidre, let's start with you. Your thoughts on this whole, the fact that more awareness has come up now since this scandal broke this past week.
Yeah, what a horrible situation, but I'm thankful that it has opened up the opportunities to discuss really what's happening for so many people in our own community. We know that 1 in 4 women will be victims of domestic violence in their lifetime. And so we all know somebody who's been affected personally, if not ourselves, by domestic violence. And so it is a huge problem that doesn't get talked about enough. And October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so this is kind of leading us into a big month where we can really try to make a difference for some people.
25%, the number's really shocking. I believe it is. And Denise Boyer runs across all socioeconomic boundaries here. Money's not the situation, not the issue. Ray Rice apparently is worth some $20 to $30 million. But it's interesting that you have a woman who stood up for her husband, right? And elected to kind of lash out this past week at the media for the releasing of the tape and talking so much about it. Is that typical, that a woman will stand up for the man in this case?
It is typical. It doesn't. Domestic violence doesn't fit nicely in a little box.
Yeah.
This is somebody that they love. It's somebody they believe in. It's somebody they've known for a long time. They have children with them. They have a home, they have a life. So it's not unusual for her to stand up for him and to be maybe his biggest cheerleader at that time. She's got a belief that it's going to change. And the picture is, I'm going to be able to help him get better or help him stop doing this. So we see that all the time.
Bottom line, when we hear about addiction, there is rock bottom, there's treatment, there's rehabilitation. Domestic violence cases, can someone get better, or does it become an inherent problem where it repeats itself time and time and time again?
It is a repeated cycle, and it's a learned behavior that the batter has learned from a very early age, that power and control works, and that's how they're supposed to be in their intimate relationships. But a batter is going to batter any person that they're in a relationship with. It's not something that's unique to this one person, or there's certain dynamics within that relationship. A batter is going to be a batter in every relationship that they're in. So the change is possible, but it's few and far between because it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of responsibility to look at yourself and see where you can change, and that's really difficult to do when it's something that's so ingrained.
The Bethany House is about helping the victims and their children, right?
Right.
Is there ever a case where the person who's causing the violence, bringing on the violence, becomes part of the process with the victim, with the victim's children? Or are they totally out of the mix? I guess in bringing them in to become part of the solution to rehab, does that ever come into play?
That's not really our role.
No?
There are
Okay.
programs out there, but really for the people that we serve are in grave danger. I mean, they're escaping
point.
for their lives. Yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes there is contact that the victim may have with that person because they may share children together. And so our job is to try to help them do that safely. And so safety planning is a really big part of what we do. And for any victim of domestic violence, working with an advocate, if it's Denise in the courts, or an advocate in the community, or a place like Bethany House, safety planning is so important because that time of leaving the relationship is so dangerous.
And that leads us to the Lucas County Domestic Violence Task Force. So when you come in, referred to by someone like Deidre from the Bethany House, Denise, I mean, where does the task force come in? At what stage?
Well, it's two different things. I run the Domestic Violence Resource Center, so they a victim would come in, and Deidre could certainly tell them to come to us. They come from court. Sometimes they just hear it word of mouth, but they come in and for a civil protection order. So we're all civil in the court that I'm in. We process that. We do safety planning with them. We do crisis intervention with them because many people are coming in crisis. We have an advocate there that walks them through the court system. We have specific resources that, we listen to them to see what they need, and then we give them that information for those resources. The task force actually meets bi-monthly, and we talk about ways that we can put it together so it's a more coordinated community response. Toledo really does a pretty good job at that, but we want to make it even better. We want to know what each court's doing with this perpetrator and how we're all keeping her safe. So that's more what the task force is doing.
Okay. And so many times, this is a matter of life and death.
Right.
When we hear from law enforcement, there are many dangerous scenarios they walk into, but in some cases, none more dangerous than a domestic violence situation. And that leads me to the task force itself. We hear about temporary restraining orders, that sometimes they don't work, and then in the end, there is a crime committed anyway, despite that TRO. And maybe you can speak to that, Denise.
Well, we tell the victim that comes in, it's a piece of paper. So we do a lot, like Deidre said, a lot of safety planning with them. Clearly, if this person is willing to break the law, they're going to violate that protection order. So we try to get in contact with the other people involved. If there's a detective on it, we make sure that they know. We try to get them in a safe place. We've had to move people out of town just to keep them safe. Am I missing anything? I'm trying to think of all the other things that we're doing with them. And like I said, if they're willing to break the law, they're going to break that piece of paper. So it isn't necessarily the piece of paper as much as making sure that they understand, being aware of their surroundings, making sure they're not followed, making sure their kids are safe.
You're at that step, and that's a terrible stage to be in. And when you get to that point, and when many of the victims come to you, they're at that point. But what's the first sign that you have a problem in a relationship? Deidre, the first sign.
Yeah, I think a big red flag is just moving so quickly into the relationship that you feel like you've been swept off of your feet. Batters like to have their victims engaged, living with them, or married within 6 months of meeting them. So it's a really quick commitment that they get from the victim, and then after that, things start to change slowly. It could be isolating her from her friends and family, starting to put those people who are usually supportive to her down, controlling where she goes, who she talks to.
So not violence right away, just these other signs.
Exactly. Domestic violence is not just about the physical abuse, it's about the power and control over every aspect of that victim's life.
Okay, well, I thank you both for coming in and addressing this topic. It is addressed, but not to the state that it's been addressed this past week. Unfortunately, it takes something like this, the Ray Rice situation, to bring it to the forefront, and you jumped at the chance to come in, and that speaks to your initiative trying to get this word out. We appreciate it. All right. Deidre Lashley from the Bethany House, Anthony Spoyer from the Lucas County Domestic Violence Task Force and Resource Center. Yes. Yeah. Thanks to both of you for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. When we come back in just a minute, look forward to the November election with a man who wants to be a state representative in Ohio's 88th House District. Back in just a moment.